All right, here we go. We are live. Hopefully, we're having some technical difficulties here. Let's see if we can get this worked out. This is our first broadcast, and it is flopping. So let's just see real quick if we can actually see we're live. We'll edit this out later. Let's bring in Pascal real quick.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think
I think
I'm
we
not
need some
showing
good
it
IT
anywhere
people.
else. Huh?
I think we need some good IT people. That's what we need.
Yeah, I think we're actually live. I'm not sure because I can't see the chat. But anyway, you know what? I'm just going to pretend we're live, and we're just going to do this anyway. So in the chat, let us know if we are live, and we're just going to pretend we're live anyway. But anyway, so we're finally here. We are live, and thanks everybody for joining us. If we're actually live, but thanks for joining us for our debut episode of OT Exposed Raw live. I hope uncut and unapologetic. So I'm not going to apologize if we're not live, but
I think you just did.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So I think that, good. I think we are live. So awesome. So this is our debut episode, our maiden voyage. So that's right. It's our maiden voyage. So, crack open a bottle of champagne and break it over something, or take a swig and pour some out for your homies, because we're coming at you in 720p. That's right. 720p, because I'm too cheap to pay for HD right now. So I'm your co-host, Clint Bo Dungeon, and with me today is another co-host. The man's so good, his first name is a programming language. Our very own Dutch oven, Pascal Ackerman.
Thank you. And I think you just dated yourself. I don't think anybody uses Pascal anymore. And if they do, let me know, because we'll pay you a visit.
I date myself often, but we're not going to discuss that right now. So anyway, what is this whole show about? What is this live stream about? So in the cybersecurity industry, a lot of podcasts, a lot of news and everything like that. And we figured we'd cover it our own way. So every week we're going to talk about things that are live, things that are happening over the week in cybersecurity. And we're not going to hold back. We're going to tell you like it is. So that's the whole premise of the show. And one thing I should mention is that I forgot to feed my kids to the demo gods, or the live stream gods. So as you noticed already, we had some glitches, and probably going to have more glitches. We're new at the broadcast thing. So, and I'm just kidding, boys. I'm not really going to feed you to the to anything. So Daddy loves you. Anyway,
watching.
They are watching. I'm sure they're watching. So what we're going to cover this week, there's been a lot of news, and what's been really dominating the news this week has been the Colonial Pipeline incident and all that good stuff. And while I do want to cover that, and hopefully cover some angles that you may or may not have seen out there, and who knows if we have anything new. It's still very speculative at this point. But I also want to cover some things in the news that, because of the Colonial Pipeline incident, I want to cover some things that you may not have seen. And there's some cybersecurity related, some OT cybersecurity related stuff. And I also want to point out that I'm just the co-host, and I'm just the beautiful face of this broadcast. Pascal's the smart one. I'm just a sidekick. So I'll just leave it at that.
I hide behind the screens.
Yeah, and that's one of the glitches we've already talked about. Maybe I do need to feed my kids to the demo gods, because Pascal's camera isn't currently working. But hopefully next week we'll have it working. But I prefer the image there of Hackerman over your face anyway. So
I take that hair, even though it's probably going to be a pain to wash that every day, but I'll take that hair over what I have right now.
I thought you did have a mullet, but anyway. All right. So let's jump into Colonial. There's one thing one thing that's been dominating the headlines with Colonial has been the fact that they paid the ransom, or whether they should have or shouldn't have, or what were the entry vectors, what were the technical aspects of the dark side ransomware. But there's something that I want to point out, because this is asinine. There was a consultant who apparently, and let's go and bring this up. There was a consultant that apparently, I guess 3 years ago, there we go, had performed an audit of Colonial Pipeline. And according to the article, it wasn't even a cybersecurity audit. The consultant admitted it wasn't even a cybersecurity audit, but he went public in this with the Associated Press last week regarding the audit that he did, and just gave a scathing review of Colonial. This guy's name was the guy that went public was Robert F. Smallwood. Yeah, yep. I feel like Office Space. The Bobs. It's like, is that your real name? But so many jokes, so little time. So little time. Anyway, so this guy, what he did was leave this scathing review of, just say, he literally said that there were basically so many holes that an 8-year-old could have attacked. And I don't know where that is in here, but anyway, he said that there were so many holes that an 8-year-old could have hacked it. First of all, dude, you don't do that. That's not professional. And I want to point out that to any other operators out there, because one of the first things happening, this doesn't make you look good, right? He said that he just couldn't let it pass. He had to come forward about this because, he had to say something. It's like, what are you saying? What are you actually doing and accomplishing by this? Because, by the way, it's national news. It's global news. You're not accomplishing anything by coming out and saying this, right? I mean, Dale Peterson in Digital Bond Group did something similar with Operation Basecamp several years ago, and pretty much flamed all of the vendors out there, the OT ICS vendors out there. But that was warranted. I'm saying that was warranted because nobody was listening. To Mr. Smallwood, this is what you did was not warranted because it's already national news. It's already global news. All you're going to do is make it to where operators now are afraid to have audits, third-party audits or assessments, because they're going to come in anyway. So they're going to be afraid that auditors and assessors are going to do the same thing that this dude did. And let me tell the operators out there, actual, true, real professionals aren't going to dox or expose their customers like this. So this dude's an idiot. I'm calling it right now. This dude's an idiot. Anything you got to say?
No, it's got the opposite effect of what he's probably trying to achieve. Although if you read the whole news article, he missed out on a big giant project, which I think is why he came out in the first place. But if we assume that he just wants to get the information out and help other people, it has the opposite effect, because people are now going to be extra careful who they're going to engage with, and we'll have less information, if anything, coming out of these breaches.
Right. And so, I mean, and we don't really need to harp on it too much. So I think that we'll just leave it at that, and we'll just move on to the next story. I just really had to call this dude out and just kind of explain to the rest of the industry that, like, this is not the norm. This is not what people do. This is not what professionals do. So
this is an outlier. And I believe when this came out, we had the same reaction to it, like, oh God, what just happened? Because everybody's gonna go look at us now and look at our consultants that do a good job and value their NDAs they have in place, and people are going to get less work.
Yeah, exactly. It's what we call pissing in the well, in its professional term, technical term, pissing in the well. Anyway, bittering the waters for everybody. Don't do it. All right. So let's talk a little more about Colonial. And I think one of the big topics I saw all over LinkedIn and through our peer groups with Colonial is the fact that the controversy on whether or not Colonial should have paid the ransom or not. And the CEO came out and explained himself and said it was a hard decision. And I think I actually have that article here somewhere. Either way, I have it somewhere. I'm not going to bring it up again. I'm still kind of new with this whole. Either way, I'll find it later. Yeah, I'm still new with this whole like running the production myself thing. So anyway, and I'm seeing a really polarized result here on whether or not what people believe that they should or shouldn't pay the ransom. And the typical norm is, right, from the government's perspective, is you don't negotiate with terrorists, and you can consider these cyber terrorists or whatnot, or criminals, but you don't negotiate, because when you pay ransom, it's just going to encourage further criminal activity like this. But, and everybody basically was giving Colonial scathing review for paying that. And I have my own thoughts, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, it's easy to sit on the sideline with this, right? It's easy to say you shouldn't pay if you're not in the middle of a big mess like this. And on the other side, it's easy to pay the ransomware and hoping that you get results quick. So there's a fine line between that. Personally, I wouldn't pay the ransom. I'd rather go through the effort of restoring these systems myself than to have to pay, because don't forget who you're dealing with. They're criminals. Who says when you pay them you're actually going to get a tool that works, right? Which in the case of Colonial is debatable.
That's what happened, right? I mean,
yep.
The unencryption tool, the encryption key, the process was so slow they still had to use their own backups, right?
Yep. But then on the other hand, if you don't do this, and it's going to take you 2 months to recover, what is the impact? So maybe that's the lead way onto it. Depending on the impact, do we pay or do we not pay? Right.
Well, and here's my perspective, and those of you that watched the webcast yesterday with Cisse, I kind of said the same thing, which was, it's not black and white. Whether I agree with it morally or ethically, I'm not even getting into that. I'm just saying that the decision for someone to make is not black and white, because if it was just some local business, if it was just a business, and the only real concern was whether or not my business is affected, or is just my business affected, yeah, now I believe that you pay the price. You suck. Your security sucks. You pay the price by sucking it up. Don't pay them, and pay the price by taking whatever time, take the knock on the head with your customers, with your revenue, whatever. However, in Colonial's case, this had further reaching effects. This had social, economic, and potentially global consequences. It was mostly economic, and then of course social consequences, because we had a bunch of idiots filling up garbage bags and plastic bags with gasoline, and gas stations were running out of fuel all over the place for panic buying, which is stupid in its own right. But the bottom line is, Colonial made the decision because there was a shortage, and it had far further reaching consequences and impact. And that's one of those cases to where he made a decision, the CEO made a decision where, basically for the greater good, the needs of the many outweighed the needs of the company.
And just put yourself in their place. When this happened, everybody in the whole world started looking at them, including the administration. That makes the decision even harder to make, right?
Yep. I think, in the end, everybody's going to get on their moral high ground. Everybody's going to take a stance, and everybody's going to, be a keyboard cowboy, and is brave behind the keyboard, and they're going to type all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I ask all of you people that are judging Colonial, at the end of the day, I ask you, would you still feel the same way if it was you not being able to get gas, if it was you not being able to, get fuel or whatever it was, not take that flight because of this? And God forbid it was a toilet paper factory and you ran out of toilet paper. I mean, come on.
Don't mention that. We had that craze. We don't want to run out of toilet paper again.
Well, I'm telling you, the next, if ransomware authors or criminals were smart, they'd now hit the manufacturing section, and specifically toilet paper and beer, because that would cause the greatest chaos. If they want to disrupt the world economically, you hit toilet paper factories and breweries. Done. World's gone.
They did something almost that bad in Holland. They actually put some ransomware on the cheese, one of the largest cheese manufacturing companies. So Holland almost ran out of cheese. I think that's unacceptable.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think maybe in Holland was maybe taking down all the dispensaries, maybe a thing too, all the coffee shops too. But anyway, moving on. So another thing that I thought was interesting is also relation to Colonial, and this also goes kind of into a bit of a moral stance, was, and I'm going to bring this up here. So there were reports, and this is kind of there was reports by other reputable news sites. I'm not familiar with this news site, but there were other news sites out there that had similar headlines, and it was that they were saying that Colonial was fine, but they shut down the pipelines because they wanted to make sure they got paid correctly. So basically their scheduling systems did get hit, but they wanted to make sure that they got paid correctly. And I want to correct that. I don't believe that it had to do with just billing and make sure they got paid correctly. I mean, yeah, I think that was probably part of it. That was a bit part of the business decision. But ultimately, and for those of you that are not familiar with industrial control systems, you have to think that the consequences of a cyber attack or ransomware systems going down in industrial control systems are much different than they are in IT systems, right? So in these systems, it's not just losing credit card databases and private information. It's consequences that can have environmental impact or even health and safety impact, loss of life kind of thing. And so, if you lose the ability to control the pipeline, the valve control, and you start popping valves, if you leak gas or petroleum, if you, God forbid, explode something and someone dies, I mean, these are the impacts and the consequences of the, of an industrial control system consequence. And so what Colonial did was that ultimately you have 5,500 miles of pipeline. And when you're talking about maintaining proper flow control, monitoring gas, monitoring metering and all of that, it really starts to become an issue of safety and environmental precautions, because you can't get to that manually. So they do this thing called going manual, right? And so they shut down all remote monitoring and remote control, all computer control, so that doesn't go out of whack, ransomware doesn't affect it, because they want to make sure that they have the ability to still run. And so in smaller pipelines, they'll send engineers or field engineers out there to take measurements, do maintenance. They'll put, they have wheels on the valves, open and close for flow control. And if you can't do that, and certainly when, they had hundreds of personnel that went out there in Colonial, but you have 5,500 miles of this, it's not easy to maintain. And so they shut it down for safety reasons. Yeah,
let's slow down on that topic really quick. Think about this. It's 5,500 miles of pipeline. If you just the sheer volume of people that you need to send out to control that, and how do you coordinate that while your company is shut down? Remember, the IT systems are shut down. So going manual is a fancy word that I've heard all over the place. But what does it involve? If you're completely blind, the sheer amount of resources that you need to throw at that to go manual is astronomical.
Yeah, and you're right. There is that has been thrown around, especially in the media, right? A lot of media talks a lot about going manual, and it is kind of more of a buzzword, kind of like OT, ICS, right? It's all become a buzzword.
Yep.
So, regardless, didn't B-52s have a song, or was it B-52s? I'd go 5,500 miles, or maybe it's 550 miles. Anyway, just reminding me of that whole thing. So I think that when it comes down to it, and we can move on from this topic, but I think when you get right down to it, is that I think it was sensationalized media coverage. Colonial didn't shut down just because they weren't going to get money. Yes, probably part of it, but ultimately it had a lot to do with safety and environmental reasons as well. So moving right along, and I think is there anything, we're coming down to, kind of the last 10 minutes of the show. We're trying to keep these shows to 30 minutes or so, and we'll go longer if we need to. That's the joy of having a live stream, is that we're not syndicated, so we don't have to keep it to
we should probably also mention that in regular podcasts, you often sit there and you're like, oh man, these guys are so wrong. If you feel that way, please tell us. You're open, but do keep in mind that you should back up your statement when you do that, because we have a nasty bite.
Well, Pascal does. I'm just a big teddy bear. So, is there anything else on Colonial? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's been out there, and there's a lot of stuff that's been covered already. And I just want to kind of cover a couple of those more controversial subjects. But if there's nothing else, we can move on. And because there's a couple other things that are out there that got overshadowed by Colonial. So, we could talk about those too. So
yeah, I've had my fair share of Colonial. Honestly, in my opinion, it's been a how you call that? Not a letdown, but it's been an anticlimactic end of it.
Yeah, and I think that's what you get. I mean, you get a lot of the media out there that grabs hold of these topics and they sensationalize it. And at the end of the day, it's just not really. It was bad for the people that didn't have gas, and I think North Carolina and Virginia, DC were the most hit, and gas stations were out of gas for 1-2 weeks. Again, it wasn't like it was toilet paper.
Was that Colonial's fault, or was that because there was such a hype and everybody loaded up their cars? And stuff?
Little from A, little from B, right? I mean, It was Colonial's fault for not having the secure systems that got hit with the ransomware. But then you had all these stupid idiots out there filling up, trash bags with gasoline. So,
I'm surprised those pictures didn't show a big cigar or a cigarette while they were filling up.
I wish justice would have been served. Anyway, I got to be careful. I can't say stuff like that. I'll get hit by the SJA. That's the social justice algorithm.
My job is to make you hit those buttons and to see if you can actually go further than you want to.
You know what? I'm trying to be good. There's a poll going on right now on how fast we'll get canceled or how fast we'll get banned because of the stuff we talk about. And I'm thinking, we're being cautious in this first episode, but I think that in the end, by the time we get to the third or fourth episode, whenever we're starting to get a little more relaxed, I think we're gonna forget and we're gonna pop off and say we're banned.
I've got $50 on the 6th episode.
Well, you know what? You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't get into this bet because we have control over it. So, I'll say, okay, well, I got on the 5th episode and I'll start dropping F-bombs and start talking about, never mind. Anyway. So, all right. Well, some of the other things we want to talk about. So, you had on talk about BadAlloc. So we had BadAlloc, or some of these Microsoft security holes. They were flagging Microsoft security holes in OT and IoT devices. These are stories that a lot of people probably totally missed, and I'll bring that up.
There's actually 3 of them that I flagged from the last month. So there's BadAllocate, which is basically a memory corruption flaw in a lot of IoT and IIoT. Sorry for saying that. I should drink if I drink. But so you get BadAllocate, which is a memory allocation implementation flaw. Then you have OpenR, however you pronounce that, stack. So basically the stack of an ENIP vendor, or a vendor that supplies an ENIP Ethernet IP stack, has a bunch of vulnerabilities in it. Some of them even allow remote code execution. So, and then there's our good friends from Forescout who came out with the DNS flaws in the TCP IP stack of about 100 million devices. So you call them a name colon rec. So basically, that one, if somebody can sit on your network and inject DNS responses, they can manipulate a device to give up secrets and to even control some of the execution flow in there. So all in all, I think the vulnerability they found combined have a deployment base of almost 10 billion devices. So most of those will be sitting off behind firewalls or completely off the network, but that's a potentially interesting amount of devices that can be owned.
So, in the grand scheme of things, how would you say these kind of rate in potential, and I'm not trying to raise FUD here, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but these issues that you've pointed out, how would you say that they rate in terms of potential higher impact and consequences compared to the Colonial ransomware incident?
I think a lot of these devices will help attackers get a better foothold in the organization, right? They're either directly accessible from the enterprise or via, so they could manipulate their way into the industrial environment. That is, if an organization is properly segmented. But the only times, in my opinion, that these devices, and I'm talking industrial side, right? I'm not talking the IoT devices that are sitting directly on the internet, like your home routers and a wireless access point. But the ones sitting on the industrial environment, if that's properly secured, unless your industrial environment is directly connected to the internet, an attacker will not be able to directly influence it.
Well, and that's the kind of the case with a lot of vulnerabilities in ICS that we've seen throughout, for the last 2 decades, right? And there's been, even today, when you see vulnerabilities that come out in the former ICS CERT or now the CISA alerts, there's a lot of vulnerabilities that come out, but if you don't have that direct access, if you don't have access to the network itself, the impact is minimal, or you can't even get to it because there's not that many remote code execution vulnerabilities out there right now.
Or what do you do with it? Okay, so I can remotely inject code on a controller, which is a bad thing by itself, but you need a very sophisticated attacker to know what they exactly do with it, right? What is your ultimate goal with having control over a PLC? There's only a few attackers that will actually use that, and I'm talking the Stuxnet type of infiltrations.
You have to
drink. But anyway, having said that, most attacks that even make it onto the industrial network are still going to use the low-hanging fruit, the easy money, like deploying ransomware, because that's an easy way to get money if that's what they're after.
Yeah,
and I made a note with one of these, like the BadAlloc. So the memory allocation implementation flaw will allow an attacker to bypass authentication and security controls. I'm thinking to myself, and I'm oversimplifying it, so what? Modbus, Ethernet IP, Step 7 protocols, all of those are wide open anyway. So what do I need to bypass authentication for?
Right. In the end, most industrial protocols don't have authentication, encryption, and that stuff. So yeah, a lot of these vulnerabilities that are being reported are really sort of benign, almost a moot point.
Look, don't get me wrong, you should patch, but more importantly, you should be in a situation where you don't have to patch at a drop notice, right? If you make sure your architecture is correct, you got all your bases covered, people cannot find your systems on the internet using showdown or census, then you have that initial protection, and you can say, okay, the next time around, and for some companies this could be once a year when they have a patch round. Now we're going to address all of these. We're going to accumulate all of these flaws. We're going to get all of our patching together, and we'll do it at once. Get yourself in a situation where you can be that tolerant.
So we are, I got a couple things I want to ask, but we are at the top of the hour, which normally we're going to try to keep these episodes around 30 minutes, but we kind of had a slow start. We had some glitches at the very beginning. Again, I forgot to feed my kids to the demo gods. And so we had a little bit of a glitch and a slow start. So I'm going to treat this kind of like soccer, or like the rest of the world calls it, football. And we're in penalty time now, right? So we're going to have some overtime here, because I want to ask a couple more questions before we wrap this up. And that question, the main question is, what do you foresee in terms of kind of the future going forward? We're starting to see more more malware attacks in terms of ransomware. We're seeing a lot of vulnerabilities. And in kind of my perspective, the way I look at it is decades ago, and whenever firewalls and IDSs were first coming out, these things like SCADA and ICS, and nobody knew about it but actual industrial operators. They were air-gapped systems. And now, because of all of the things that are happening, like Colonial, the Florida, there's another thing that we completely didn't discuss today was the Florida water. It's old news right now, but there was some new stuff to talk about, which is the Florida water plant incident. But anyway, my point is, you're seeing more and more attacks and more targeted attacks on industry. And so, you're going to start to see more targeted ransomware attacks and vulnerabilities and these sorts of things in an industrial. Where do you think it's going to go? Where do you think the bigger impacts are going to be? You think it's going to be in the industry? Sorry, got distracted. Do you think it's going to be in the industrial attacks? Do you think it's going to be in ransomware, or do you think we're going to see some sort of holy grail vulnerability out there?
I was really, I shouldn't say hopeful. I was really curious when ThreatGen came out, when they were attacking modules, where they were basically using the module's logic to infiltrate a system and to basically operate on the control plane level with it. We don't hear many of those attacks anymore, maybe because they're too stealthy and nobody finds them. What we do see, what a big trend is two particular things. One, ransomware attacks on the IT side are changing. The ransomware is not going to be just encryption anymore. It's encryption and stealing of data. So if you think, I got backups, I'm going to recover, they're going to come back and say, we have your data. And if you don't pay us, we're going to put that on the dark web, or we're going to put it out there for people to pick up. On the other side, ransomware operators and actors and attackers, they have found the ICS. They find that, okay, on an IT side, it's easy to recover. You pop a backup. You might not even care about the data. But on the control side, if you're running a business, if you're running a plant, and we take down the main systems that support that, people are more likely to pay these ransomware because they have no other options. A lot of times, these environments are forgotten about. There's no patching, there is no updates, there's no backups of the system. So a lot of times when they hit those systems, people are going to be like, I don't know what to do. I either rebuild from scratch or I pay these guys a ransom and hopefully I get a key that works. So those two trends.
Somebody out there is going to accuse you of just giving them an idea, but that's okay.
Actually, they gave me that idea, so just to cover my own behind.
Yeah. So, and when it comes down to, attacks on industrial, an impact, I think that I'm just kind of going over some things that people that aren't familiar with industrial control system attacks, don't know yet, but it's important to mention for those people that one of the ways, that ransomware can affect a control system is if it actually gets into a critical component or a critical asset, like a human machine interface or an HMI, where they're using that terminal to view or control remotely, monitor, review, and control remotely that process. And if you lose visibility, if you lose the ability to control the process, that's where you have to go into where they're talking about going manual or shut down the process, because you have no idea if it's going out of control, or you have no idea if something's being overpressurized or catching on fire, the temperature's too high or whatever. And so that's one of the areas where it can affect it. But if you
don't forget don't forget about ERP and MES systems as well. So an MES system is the link between the enterprise and your production system that tells you, hey, start running 600 boxes of this and 1,200 boxes of that. If that link is gone, there's nothing feeding your production. So then manual is an option. But if you really encrypt all of your HMIs, I'd be hard pressed to say you could run even manually.
Yep. Well, that's I think that's kind of the case that happened with Colonial, right? I mean, They I don't think that didn't hit them. Let's be clear. Their control systems did not get hit. There was their IT systems or systems in their IT, their business network, but they shut down for that precaution, because I think that's the case. I think that they figured that if it did hit our control systems, that's the problem we're going to have. And they have too much pipeline to run manual in that way. So, I think that's going to do it for this episode. I think we're going to wrap up there and leave it at that. And I think we're still leaving a lot of meat on the bone here to discuss. But like I said, we don't want to take up an entire hour or too much time every day or every Friday. I mean, so we're going to wrap it up there. We'll talk about more next week. And if you want to be a guest on the show, let us know. We plan on having guests. We guess what? We also plan on starting the future shows without a glitch or without knowing if we're going live or not. But so I'm sorry, kids. I'm going to have to feed one of you to the demo gods. But but either way, I think we figured out what was wrong. So we should be able to start next week without a problem. But yeah, I mean, catch us next Friday. Catch us every Friday. And if you like what we're doing here, this is the first time I ever get to say this. Hit the subscribe button. I just always wanted to say that.
Right
I've never
there.
done a YouTube
Hit that button.
before. Yeah. So hit that like button. My kids watch these YouTube shows all the time, and this is the first time I get to say it.
Do it.
Anyway,
Do it.
so do it. Do it. All right. So thanks everybody for joining us. If you're joining us live, thanks. And we'll leave this. You'll get the recording will remain. We'll have more in the future. So we'll see you next week. Thanks everybody. Take care.